Wasn't that clever? So flourishing together in Northeast Wisconsin. I'm very, very, very excited about this. It involves the three historically lay-led fellowships that are here today: Green Bay, Stevens Point, and Fond du Lac fellowships. We all know that it was a coalition that began last September as a temporary response to the COVID restrictions that we were all facing. We felt that we were stronger together than to try to muddle on separately. And it worked, after a rough start, of course, but it worked. So now over the winter, the presidents and then eventually some of the other parts of the boards have formalized this. And so beginning July 1st, we are moving into a coalition to formally do things together. All the services that we will have, hopefully in physical spaces, will have a virtual component so that those of you that are joining from afar will continue to be able to do so. But the biggest portion of this is really about me and my contract. It's going to, instead of currently, you probably don't know this, but I have 3 separate contracts with all 3 fellowships, and then Door County was an additional part of it as well. And it got to be very confusing and very cumbersome. So it's all going to be coordinated by Open Circle. Thank you, Bev, the treasurer of Open Circle. And my contract will be half-time Open Circle and quarter time each for the Point Fellowship and the Green Bay Fellowship. But I think from your perspective, the most important of this contract is my ministry now has 3 primary hats. I've kind of dabbled in the other 2, but now it's formally putting it into place. So let me tell you what that's about. There's my usual minister hat, which I'm going back to creating just 2 services a month. And then I will physically rotate across the 4 congregations every Sunday. 2 Sundays a month at Open Circle, 1 at Green Bay, and 1 at Stevens Point. I will also try to have office hours. It'll be roughly every week to 2 weeks, and they'll be published. And those are designed to be a way that we can physically meet with each other. And it might be because of a pastoral care concern that we want to talk about. It could be some sort of administrative matter. I often meet with the presidents of the congregations physically, or the administrative assistant that's responsible for getting out the communications. Or it could just be a stop by because we want to keep our relationship going physically. But I do want to remind you that just because there's limited office hours every week or every other week doesn't mean that we can continue to meet with each other, or cannot continue to meet with each other virtually. That will still exist. I'm always available by phone, texting, Facebook Messenger, or email to set up a time where we can meet just like this, or over the phone if we don't want to do it virtually with a picture. There's also meetings that I will be involved in, just like I have been in the past physically and have been virtually. Governing board meetings, service planning meetings, which service planning is going to be done as one committee across all 3 in the future. Membership development is probably the most developed at Open Circle, but it's the idea that we really know who is involved, both friends and members, and how often we've seen them, and maybe reach out to them to make sure that they're feeling welcome or finding their niche where they're meeting other people, being more intentional about that, those kind of meetings. And then a big one in the future will be these children and teen programming. There's going to be meetings with both the families and caregivers of the children and teens, as well as the people involved in making the programs happen. And then finally, and this is more of the admin meeting, is the newsletters, the formal communications, the scheduling, that kind of thing. So that, all those meetings, the leadership, the preaching, pastoral care is my minister hat. Now I'm formally taking on a director of religious exploration kind of hat, but across all 3 fellowships. So I will be coordinating the Sunday children's programming. And you saw an example during the Time for All Ages. The biggest workload is the weekly videos that tie to the sermon, that provide the main content or the lesson for the room. We will have a paid staff member, very, very part-time, maybe a couple hours a week at most, in each congregation to help make the program come alive physically. But the idea is that if we've got volunteers helping to make sure the room's set up, I'm providing the content, that's minimal hours that person has to be involved and that we have to pay for, frankly, because we're all on budgets, right? It requires us also, though, to have a list of volunteers. We always have to have 2 adults in a room, especially when children are involved. And so there'll be a sign-up sheet for you to be able to volunteer maybe one Sunday every couple of months, not a big onerous commitment where you're going to miss the services. And you're just helping out so that if we need to, we can split apart into 2 smaller groups, or maybe there's a child that just needs a little bit more attention. I said earlier, there's somebody that loves libraries and loves books and would love to go and swap out the books month to month for the room. I also mentioned there's donations of supplies, bins, props, those kinds of things. Once we decide what we want, we don't want just random supplies coming in. We could ask you to sponsor a whole bin, and that would really, really help out. And then basically it boils down to the volunteer assisting whatever the lead's doing. Now the teen program is completely new, and I'm very excited about it. We have 1 to 2, maybe 3 teens per congregation. And right now, I think they feel like they're just kind of floating out there. They're part of this hippy dippy baby boomer family that believes in this liberal church, but all of their friends are Catholic or Lutheran or Baptist, and they don't quite know how they fit in. So the whole idea is to build a community. And to build a community, we're going to meet more frequently, but for less time. So the idea is weekly at a time of their choosing. Who cares? It could be 11 o'clock at night on some night, but it's good for them. And we get to know each other as well as work on the curriculum for teens, which I'll talk about more in a minute. There's also talk of, I've been working with the Fox Valley Fellowship, that we could probably meet up with them maybe quarterly, maybe for a lock-in, maybe for a day-long kind of retreat, so that we feel a little bit more of something larger than ourselves. And they're talking about a weekend trip at some point to Chicago to see all the historic Unitarian Universalist sites in the area and maybe meet with some youth down there. So that's really exciting. So I'm really stoked about the teen program. Now, the content, other than building community, those of you that have been around larger Unitarian Universalist fellowships or have a long history with us know that we often have a coming of age program. And those of you that come from a Christian background, it's the equivalent of confirmation for us, that they go through a year-long program to understand what we're all about and then formally join as a member. There's also OWL, which OWL, it stands for Our Whole Lives, and it's a human sexuality and healthy relationship program that I've taught 2 or 3 times. Then there's a whole section of discovering other faiths. And historically, that meant you visited other congregations, other synagogues, temples, things like that. We'll figure out what we want to do, but there'll be that content as well as understanding Unitarian Universalism, and ultimately writing their own belief credo and hopefully presenting it in a service in the congregation. So all of those will be melded in. We may use the monthly themes I'm going to talk about as well, but the whole idea is instead of a year of this, a year of that, a year of this, it would all be blended together, because we live in a world where nobody can commit to this teen program for 4 years in a row, and we want to make sure that our youth get the content that they need. So that's the Director of Religious Exploration hat. The last hat is less time consuming, but very important. And it's sort of a congregational life coordinator. And it's touching base with each of the congregations about adult programming. How are we getting the adults involved? Should we try something new? Is something kind of outdated? We could drop it. Having a healthy congregation team so that we get a sense of the spirit of the congregation before maybe conflicts happen or before people tend to just wander away, we never see them anymore, to really keep engaged with our membership and our friends. Now, to put this, that was a lot to throw at you in what I'm doing. What I want to do is give you a visual so that you can get a sense of what does all this mean? How does it fit into what we already have? And where can I find my way to connect to it? So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And I have to say, I've kind of re-engaged with my corporate career before I became a minister, because I'm going to make full use of the PowerPoint slides. So bear with me today. Everything we do, as you can see represented by this big green oval, is firmly grounded in Unitarian Universalist principles, values, and traditions. Those of you that joined really early, we were having a little bit of a conversation that many came to the congregations, the fellowships, because they were learning something, and it felt sort of like a lecture series. And I wanted to point out that we are not UW Green Bay or Marian University or UW Stevens Point. If you want to just learn stuff, you can go there. What we are about is learning, but in the context of our UU values, principles, and traditions. And that will firmly continue. And it will continue at the individual fellowship level, tied to each individual fellowship's mission and vision. So this isn't like a mega merger where we're all becoming one thing. There's very much separate identities and separate programmings across the three fellowships. Probably the biggest, what we're most famous for is the justice-focused initiatives. And in that, we're always seeking systemic change, and we are often allied with other organizations in the community, and we join with them to seek justice. Another is community-focused activities. Often this is the heart of our second principle, enabling equity and compassion in human relations, aiding the less fortunate. But a big chunk of what happens in our congregation are the congregation-focused activities to maintain our faith community. You can always get involved in the governing board, in the financial stewardship of the congregation, in the building and grounds, now that we're coming back to physical spaces. The member development is what I talked about before. And then probably a new team is going to evolve that's both technology and communication. Because if there's anything we've learned during the COVID period, that those two things are highly integrated. But then there's more, and this is where I'm primarily focused, in the intra-fellowship stuff. So I'm going to get rid of all that busyness and let's just focus on this bubble. It's still grounded within Unitarian Universalist values, principles, and traditions and under individual fellowships, but it's across fellowships this time. I'm going to reintroduce to some of the congregations, Stevens Point, Fond du Lac, and for the first time in Green Bay, Soul Matters. It's a very highly organized group of monthly themes. It was created originally out of the large Unitarian church in Rochester, New York, and then the team kind of spun off and has created this content as a separate entity. And you get these packets that are collaboratively created across 130 congregations that participate. You get information for chalice circles or covenant groups, which we'll talk about in a minute, for Sunday morning worship, for religious exploration, for music. It's just a wealth of information and resources that I think is really important when you're working in an area like we are with very small congregations that don't have a lot of staff. So that's where we're going and what we're going to buy into next year, the monthly themes, and it'll be across all fellowships. You'll see it most on the Sunday morning services and the children's program that I just walked you through a minute ago. But chalice circles, I know that there are chalice circles up and running, and they have been for years with Open Circle, but not so much with the Point Fellowship, and I'm not sure about it with Green Bay Fellowship. But the idea of a chalice circle is that it's a covenanted group. You sign up to be a part of it, and you make a commitment to be together at least a whole year with the same group of people. And it's very structured, and it's closed once the 8 people have been chosen or sorted out to be part of that group. It's closed because the idea is you go through a whole year meeting once a month to go deeply on a topic, and you get to know the other people really, really well. It also has a covenant of privacy, that what you learn in that group is not to be shared with other people. So it's a very rich and wonderful way to get to know other people in your congregation deeply. The one thing that will be different is I'm going to offer a chalice group across the fellowships. And if we have other leaders that feel comfortable doing that, we can offer more than one, because maybe there's only a couple of people per congregation that want to be part of it. And you need a group of about 6 to 8 people to make it viable. So that's one of the activities we'll have. Another one is the teen program that I already talked about. And that also involves the Fox Valley Fellowship, hopefully. And then finally, affinity groups. Those of you that are really into the men's group or the women's group or the book group or the cooking group or the yoga group, or all those things that happen all the time in our fellowships, don't be scared. We're not taking them over. That's why there's 2 bubbles. There's affinity groups that lie under that are fellowship specific, and they're going to continue on the way they always have been, no change at all. But then there's also affinity groups that are intra-fellowship. So think of the movie discussion, the Let's Talk, the book discussion, or even the 5:30 every night check-in group. There are groups of people getting together for specific purposes, specific interests that are across all 3 fellowships that we will continue to have into the future. And I might add that in my case, all of these things, the Chalice Circles, affinity groups, teen program, is all going to be virtual. There's no need to get in your car on a winter night and go out to the building and start up the furnace. We're all going to sit in our comfy little rooms with our hot chocolate and have our groups virtually. That's the one thing that we have really learned how to do coming out of COVID. So that's a visual representing how things are going to break out into the future. So I guess I'm going to close with, how can you support all of this? Well, the very obvious first way is to come on Sundays, be a part of the community, and we get together the most and the most often, the most infrequent in numbers of people and the most often on Sunday morning. Be a part of the community. I've often said, lay-led fellowships in particular, it's all about the community. People come for the people to see their friends, and then they stay for the service. The second way, and this is a passion of mine, is to support the programs of the children and the teens. I've said enough about it, but please support that any way you can. And then the third piece of advice is to follow your passion and try something new. I often said when I got involved with teams or committees at the Fox Valley Fellowship 20 years ago, when I was trying to figure out how to become a leader in a corporate organization, that the fellowship functioned as a leadership incubator for me. I could take on roles of leadership, and people were graceful when I made mistakes, and that the responsibility wasn't too large or overburdening for me. And it was a way to develop myself professionally. So get to know others anywhere in the fellowship with the same interests or skills. And overall, the important thing is your own spiritual development. We use the word spiritual in a really broad sense. It means develop yourself in the things that matter in every way that you get involved in the fellowship. Well, my friends, we are launching something very new and innovative. And I'm very excited, and those that have been involved are very excited about it as well. You should know we are a model for the Unitarian Universalist Association. We've already been involved in one virtual workshop or format, I don't remember what it was called, where we were talking about what we were doing. And a lot of other small congregations are noticing. They're watching. They're hoping that we will be very successful and perhaps create an option for small lay-led fellowships elsewhere in the country. So our topic this month is flourishing together. And it is my greatest hope that we flourish together in this new endeavor. Amen, and may it be so.